Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Joe Tossi from TechTables.com, and you're listening to the Public Sector Show by Tech Tables. This podcast features human-centric stories from public sector CIOs, CISOs, and technology leaders across federal, state, city, county, and higher education. You'll gain valuable insights into current issues and challenges faced by top leaders. Through interviews, speaking engagements, live podcast tour events, we offer you a behind-the-mic look at the opportunities top leaders are seeing today. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and hit that follow button and leave a quick rating. Just tap the number of stars that you think this show deserves. We have Lynn Fyhrlund today, who's the CIO at Milwaukee County and ex-Command Sergeant Major. Lynn, welcome to Tech Table.
Thanks, Joe.
Super excited to have you on. This is one of the things I love about your background is just the military history. We're going to dive into that and then how that ties in with technology.
Now, a quick word from one of our brand partners. Nagarro is a leading provider of digital government services, partnering with state, local, and federal clients on some of their most strategic technology projects. Nagarro offers expertise in digital services, legacy modernization, case management, data and AI, service desk, cybersecurity, and more. Check out Nagarro.com. That's Nagarro.com.
Lynn, my favorite, Desert Storm. And the reason why I say my favorite is I'm just a big history buff. So I was going back and kind of reviewing my notes, and I actually went down a rabbit hole, which is dangerous because I'm so busy, but I love history so much. Operation Desert Storm began on January 17th, 1991, after Iraqi forces who had invaded neighboring Kuwait refused to withdraw. The conflict is now commonly known as the Gulf War. So from start to finish, Desert Storm only lasted 43 days. But I was reading also that it was only about 100 hours of combat, of like actual war. And you're speaking at a conference in mid-May, the 128th Civic Dinner Dance honoring Desert Storm veterans. First, thank you for serving.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
And just could you paint the picture and the landscape for those who are not familiar with Desert Storm? And I think it was before Desert Storm, it was Desert Shield, right? You could just maybe
Correct.
give us some context behind that.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, boy, and going back in the history, you're digging up, you got to remember back at that time frame, I was 18 years old. So imagine coming out of high school and your first experience is going to Desert Storm. So the Desert Storm, to paint the context of it was the largest, I was in the Army Reserves. It was the largest reserve deployment since World War II. So this country, all of a sudden, it was a war where we sent 500,000 troops to Saudi Arabia to defend Saudi Arabia and liberate Kuwait. And at the same time, it was the concept around to win over the American people and get support by the American people, deploy the reserve forces or the regular army forces. So if you look at that back at that time period, there was a heavy reserve draw because all the support elements were inside of the reserve units. And anyway, long story short, it was to expel the Iraqis from they put a timeline of leave out by January 16th. The deadline passed, and as we know, Desert Storm started out. At that time frame, just to paint for where I was at, I had landed in country on January 11th. So I was at this time period when the war starts out, which is down south, and it was so I witnessed on that first or second, I believe it was first night, the first missile intercept of a Patriot to a Scud missile system. And if you don't imagine being 18 years old, reservist, deployed to the Middle East, and you get there and the Patriot goes off, it breaks the sound barrier immediately. So first of all, wide eyes, everyone's wide eyes, and now all of a sudden there's sparks in the sky. And we had already donned on our chemical suits. So that too, you missed some parts of the story. We had chemical gear on, chemical suits on. As soon as the explosion occurs in the air, everyone on the ground's running gas. We're all donning our gas masks, running our gas masks for the first couple hours. And after that, the war is going on. It's a big air war in Dhahran. There's an air base near there. You can hear jets going nonstop. My unit rolls out shortly up north there. We wind up at King Khalid Military. So I'm now living in the middle of northern Saudi Arabia. We created my job, just to go back there, was an ammunition supply unit. So we supplied all the ammo for all the units. So we're talking from bullets to missiles, right? So everything that units would need for bombs and stuff like that, they would come to us. And so we were set up in northern Saudi Arabia. It was approximately 50 square mile ammunition supply in northern Saudi Arabia. And from there, as the air war progressed on, we were receiving tons of ammunition. And then when the 100-hour ground war happened, days before that, it's not like we're told that the ground war is about to begin. We just started shelling tons and tons of ammo, and the roadways just became jammed, like 4 or 5 wide, everyone trying to shift. And so you knew something was going on, but you didn't know much. And again, being an E4 at that time, you're told what to do. You're not giving out orders on what to do.
Yeah. And I was reading, and I also watched this short History Channel documentary. And I think one of the things, it was one of the most, I think, successful U.S. missions, I think, just as far as casualties are concerned. I think Saddam Hussein lost something like 30,000. I think the U.S. lost maybe 200, maybe 250. And I think I'm going back, and I was like, really wanted to actually dive in and ask you what you're seeing right now between Russia and Ukraine, but maybe that'll be over a beer off the podcast. So we say on the tech tables. But again, I love what you brought. You're an 18-year-old, you're being thrown in, and obviously you learned a lot. So I was curious, what lessons did you glean from your service in Desert Storm that you took back to the public sector today?
Well, yeah, there's a lot because there's a lot of stories with inside that part of my life. I was actually part of a group that went up to Kuwait City in northern Kuwait also to take out the Iraqi munitions out of the ground, which could be its own story in itself. But from that, there's a lot of leadership. We had hired a lot of locals to help us with that. And in fact, we had hired a lot of Palestinians that lived within Kuwait to work with us because at the time, the Palestinians were not looked fondly upon because they felt that they had collaborated with the Iraqis. And so U.S. government, we were hiring them to come work and they could make money with us and they'd help us do it. But one of those things you glean off of all of this when you put it together and you look where I was at and how I got into technology and you put together the leadership from taking civilians, helping people out, the service part of it, being a public sector CIO, there's a lot inside me that wants to help people. And I think some of it's gleaned from there because you saw people that were in distress. And by them working with us, we helped them, fed them, gave them purpose, gave them value. And I think from the technical side, from that point of view, you think about the technology world in 1991, from a mail part of it, technology mail, it took 6 weeks to 8 weeks for us to get a letter. So our letters going out would take 6 to 8 weeks to get home, 6 to 8 weeks back. You're talking a 3 to 4 month turnaround on just information going back and forth. And then for phones, with the way it worked for us, because we're ammunition, we're out in the middle of nowhere. When we're driving down the road and you see a stack of satellite dishes, you knew there was communications there, and you drive across the desert towards the satellite dishes, and you park and you go up and you stand in line and you get your 5-minute phone call, and you're lucky if you could call, once a week. Boy, I don't even think it was that. I want to say it was longer. I wish I would have kept a diary all about that the entire time, because then I could say, got to call home today, got to call home that. But so if you look at the technology, very primitive. But now you look at CNN side of the house. I talked to my parents, friends, and that they were watching the news broadcast on CNN. This is where CNN, I think, really launches forward. People got to see a war in real time and get information almost in real time of what's going on. And you saw the technology in the United States, the money we had spent in the 80s on from Tomahawk cruise missile systems to just how the military functioned. And if you looked at how we function very effectively, and it showed the world how technology can help you function effectively. I think it's a turning point for the entire world. Look where the technology is going. I think that's where my love started back then for technology of that. And I can tell you the effects of the Gulf War, just from the leadership side, the technology side, and also falling behind. I had fallen behind my peers, my classmates that went to college. They had gone through. By the time I got back, I don't come back until August of 1991. And by then, my friends have completed their freshman year. They're on their sophomore year. I get accepted to UW-Madison to go for political science. And I'm 2 weeks out, literally hit the ground 2 weeks out, and I turn it down. It's one of those things I regret, but make up for it later in life. So I regret turning down. So I turned around, just worked for a little while. My friends came over to my place that following year, and I saw that I was 2 years behind them. And that's when I said, I need to go do something. And I went to a tech college. It's a good story. I flipped over. I said, what degrees do you have? I flipped over their panel. I looked down the line and said, hey, what makes the most money per hour, or $8 per hour, was a programmer system analyst. And here I am 30 years later, I'm the CIO of Milwaukee County, because I started there, and I took all that military leadership and love for technology and rolled it all right into my civilian career.
I think you had said that you were behind, but I don't think you're behind. I think you got some really great experience during that time. And one of the things the public sector often gets a knock for is that they're not as innovative as they could be, but you mentioned it perfectly. On the military side, there's a lot of innovation happening. The Patriot missile, that would take down other missiles. I think that was the first actual war where that was deployed. And so even today, I know the U.S. military, I've talked to a couple CIOs in the military where there's some pretty advanced technology that's being deployed, and getting that firsthand glimpse in the public sector, whether you start college a year later or 2 years later or a trade school, none of that matters. You ended up on the right journey. But this got me thinking about an interesting question around leading up and down the chain of command. So right now you're the CIO, but back then you were a kid. So how did you learn to balance the different perspectives up and down the chain of command? Obviously you're the one taking all the instructions and just going, but you still have to make calls. Or is there a period where you had to influence your boss at all? I'm just curious of how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, that's very interesting, Joe. I'm thinking back to my time frame and then how my military career went and how it accelerated after that event, and of finding leadership. They see leadership in you. I think during that time frame, even though you got to influence up, part of the things is you look in and believe in the mission, right? You got to look at the mission, believe in the mission, believe in what we're out there doing. I told you that we were part of a task force that went up to Kuwait. That brings value to you, right? You're going to go clean up munitions that people could stumble upon, hurt themselves, and that it brings you missions. I think from that, your leaders instill in you, hey, this is a valuable mission. And then when you also expound it from yourself, as you carry yourself on, you reiterate how important this mission is. And even when you got your fellow E4, E3s are like, sometimes they get described because they've been gone for so long from home, or they have something going on with them. You got to bring them up. And I really believe that I went to Desert Storm, went to Iraqi Freedom, through my journey to become a command sergeant major. I truly believe you got to have strong leadership. And I always thought that when I was out there leading, it wasn't about me. It's about the position. And people look at it. They want stability. They want to know what's going on. And I think providing that leadership, that clear direction helps people it helps calm them down, helps them make sure they deliver value. And then at the end, they feel they're satisfied with it. I think I think when you ask about influencing leadership upwards, it's responding to that leader that's inspiring. If you have leadership around you that inspires you, give 110%. Show them that their leadership inspires, and others will follow that leader. And so I think as we talk here, and I think about, I'm having like flashbacks the entire time we're talking. But as we talk about this, I think what you look for is you try to make sure that those inspiring leaders are followed, and that those inspiring leaders know that they're inspiring, and then you carry that on with yourself, and you carry that to other soldiers in them.
Okay, so now let's take the present day, and I love what you said about believing in the mission. So maybe you can just talk about the County of Milwaukee's mission, and then how you're now, as the CIO on the tech side, how you're leading your team through the mission in Milwaukee.
That's great, Joe. Milwaukee County, I think we got to start back as why, because I'll give you the vision for it. So the vision is by achieving racial equity, becoming the healthiest county in Wisconsin. And I'm saying that this is a great platform on a podcast. What does that mean, and how do you become a healthiest county? In 2019, Milwaukee County declared racism a public health crisis. We realized that when you looked at health rankings, and health rankings are based upon poverty, health, life, how long does someone live within a certain zip code, what's the birth rate, death rate, and stuff like that. And if you looked at Milwaukee County, there were a lot of inequities inside Milwaukee County, and if you were a person of color, the odds were more against you than more if you were white. And why is that? So our mission is to improve the overall health of the county by achieving racial equity. Now, that's going to be my boss. When we talk about this, my boss had made a quote. He said it may have took us 400 years to get here. It may take us 400 years to get out, but we're starting now. And we've made a big commitment within Milwaukee County to achieve this, and we're making great moves. When that was in 2019, it's 2022 now. I can tell you from a technology CIO, I took over the reins of this of the CIO in August of 2019. So I'm walking in here, looking for an IT strategy. We have to build an IT strategy. Off of here's the objectives from that. And the objectives of the county are, just to summarize quickly, are intentional inclusion, bridging the gap, investing in equity. So we build an IT strategy to address that. Brought all the business units in, had them tell us what they're trying to do, understand what we need to do technology-wise, where's our gaps with that, and then create a roadmap, a 3-year roadmap for us to help the different business units, because county, We have an airport to a zoo. So it's try all those different business lines and try to get them to achieve that objective of the county. From our aspects of it, we looked at also from technology. What do we have to do from technology? And if you look in the technology world, and I think if you look up the stats, 68% of technologists are white males. So how do we change the dynamic of that? And so things that we have done from within our own IT department is, when I said invest in equity or invest, we invest in nonprofits where we actually mentor people of color, or we help out with students that are in that want to get into technology fields. And what we've done is now we've created a pipeline for people from internships to get hired from just within. But it's not just our own. We're not the only part of this. I mean, there's many corporations within Milwaukee County doing the same thing. It's a big push for us, and it's a big win on that side. I think the other thing that we've done from within inside our IT department is changed the way we looked at our interview process. And we now, some things that we looked at and just bringing in different parts of our IT department, having meetings and understanding what can we do to do better, and things that we're doing better now are such as when you come to interview at Milwaukee County for an IT position, there'll be a panel that interviews you, but that panel will have someone that looks like you across the table, because what that does is it provides a friendlier environment, a more comfortable environment for people to interview. And what we've learned from that is that I believe people interview better because they feel more comfortable in those positions. And the result of it is we are hiring more people of color now in the IT department and getting careers going. And I think it all comes down to is providing that people want to work at. And I think those are the things that we're starting to address. And then with inside, then there's even more. That's just from the inside of the IT. From the outside, we're working on urban broadband devices to people, training for the public. All these things we're just trying, and that's just from the technology side. And then you try to get the whole county. There's a whole bunch of work that's going on.
Yeah, so from what I heard was you said that you were looking to build an IT strategy, and I'm sure there's actual technology meat in the strategy, but what I heard is that you're really looking to build is a people strategy, a human-centric strategy first, and then out of that, I know it's a shameless plug, but I've interviewed enough CIOs to realize that it's a human-centric approach to technology, and technology isn't the barrier, and it's reaching the human side of the aisle across the different agencies and folks that really transforms how IT is delivered. And I'm sure you would also probably agree with that too.
Absolutely. When you said that we have 5 pillars, if you want to say. The first 2 pillars, one's customer satisfaction, right? What's the end user experience for the user? The next pillar is diversify our team. And so we have that. Input for all of our technology decisions that are diverse, and that we're making sure that we're addressing every aspect that we can to ensure that Milwaukee County is all inclusive.
Yeah, we talked a couple of days ago, and when I was actually in an Uber on the way to a conference task in Austin, and you talked about end user experience and no one being left behind. Could you maybe add a little more details to that? I don't know if I heard everything while I was in the Uber.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. One of the things I work on, I talk to everyone is, end user experience. What is the end user experience when someone puts their hands on the keyboard? What is their experience? And there's many different aspects that I look at from the employee standard. When an employee works for Milwaukee County, if they have a great experience with their technology, they'll most likely give a great experience to a constituent or a customer to Milwaukee County. If they have a bad experience, of course, if they're having a bad day with the computer, they're probably going to have a bad day with you if you're trying to get services from Milwaukee County. So I'm all about the end user experience. Same goes with if you go onto our website or whatnot. So I have a big drive to constantly improve and make sure that when people use technology, they're getting from it what they want, or even a higher level of experience. They should not have a bad experience with technology. If they have a bad experience with technology, like I said, that just starts out with a bad day. And we've all been there. We've all been there when we've had, technology fail for us. And so that's the whole end user experience part of it. And then we talked to don't leave anyone behind with technology. The other part, when we talked about urban broadband, access, device access, I know from working with not-for-profits in the city and that within the county, that Milwaukee County has approximately 100,000 households that don't have internet, right? There's not a line to their house. And I also know that 60,000 houses don't have a device in their house. So when you think about it, that sounds astronomical, it's 25%, but that's truth. That's what we see. So how do we not, what do we need to do so people aren't left behind with technology? When we talk about that, it's most likely the most disadvantaged people that don't have internet, that don't have a device. Now because they don't have that, we're leaving them behind in telehealth. We're leaving them behind in education. We're leaving them behind in just getting jobs. And so what are we going to do? And so things that we're working on, we're looking at urban broadband, what we can do. And in the state of Wisconsin, there's different laws. Every state is different. So laws are different. What can the government provide? You can say, well, Lynn, set up your own ISP. State of Wisconsin does not allow government entities to set up ISP unless there's a bunch of criteria we have to go through, but there's almost like a non-compete with the local ISPs. And so what can we do to help provide that internet access? And that's what we're doing right now. I'm working with the United Way, the city of Milwaukee, Milwaukee Public Library System, Milwaukee Public School System, about what can we do. And I know the Milwaukee Public School System, when they went COVID, I know they put out 13,000 sent students home with MiFi. We need to do better than that, because MiFi will work for so much, but they're not the end of all. So we're looking at what can we do? Can we provide fiber to houses? Can we put mesh networks over top of neighborhoods? What's the responsibility of government to help people achieve that? And I look at it from a technology point is that what we need to do is that we need to lift everyone up. And if we coming out of the COVID, like we're coming out of COVID now, I do believe metropolitan areas that are technology enabled, that have invested in infrastructure and technology, and have taken this route of training constituents in how to use technology, make sure they got devices, and make sure you can get online. Those are the areas that are going to be prosperous. And when I talk about Milwaukee being the healthiest county, that fits the MO of it. That's right. That's one of the, to me, it's like one of the petals of the whole flower of trying to make this all work well, is to try to enable everyone so that they have access to technology. And that didn't occur before. I think part of it is we look at our schools to say, are they teaching technology, and how do we lift up the community? How do we get people into tech jobs? If we're like anywhere else, I can't find enough people to hire, and every company is like that. And so that's also part of it, is that there's jobs out there. We have these communities with tons of smart people, and they just need an avenue to get to that job.
Yeah, no, that's really great. One of the things that I was thinking about a lot. So I coach high school basketball, which I know a lot of viewers know. So I get firsthand with 14 to 17, almost turning 18-year-olds, and their experience with technology, and their experience with just how their perspective, right? Going back to perspective, how they think about the world. And then recently, I sold my car, which is crazy, but I sold to a buddy of mine. And so I started walking more places, partly for health, because I sit so much on airplanes. And so I started walking, and I started having this different perspective as I was walking through the city to the coffee shop. And so far, it's 15 minutes. And I started seeing homeless people that I would normally see if I was driving. And so this thought came to me with the end user experience. And then for me, I wrote down walking in their shoes. And then I can never turn off my brain. And so I'm always thinking about how I can solve this problem. And of course, no one in Santa Barbara County ever gets back to me about anything, but that's okay. Maybe as Tech Tables grows, they'll get back to me. This concept of empathy and just either walking in their shoes, or maybe even better, it's like probably you're more realistically walking alongside their shoes, so you can see, where they're at in their life, and then you can start to address that problem. I think before, a lot of folks were on trying to close the digital divide. Technology, that divide has been around for a while. And I was, maybe 10 years ago, I was volunteering at an organization called Year Up. You might be familiar with it. They have it across a number of major cities. And I would go to help kids, how figure out hey, how to use a computer. This is 10 years ago. How to use a computer. They would bring these inner city kids into downtown Chicago. And I would, but the first step is they would never pay attention to you about technology until you can touch their heart. And that's always the human-centric piece, is you've got to touch someone's heart first before you can actually skill them up, level them up. And it's the same thing on any sports team. And I know I talk about it on Tech Tables too, but any team that you're leading, you have to get that mission, get them to believe in that mission first, and then you can really start to make that transformation. That's a long-winded answer to say, I love what you said and where you're leading the team. And so those are just a couple of thoughts that had bubbled to my mind just around empathy and leading. Coming up, we've got the Tech Table Sweet Talk series. Lynn, do you know about the Sweet Talk series? These are my live podcast events. I'm launching these across the U.S., Phoenix, starting April 21st with Arizona State CIO J.R. Sloan and 7 other CIOs. I used to read everyone's name. I feel so bad. It just became so long because I kept booking more events. So it was like 30, 40 people. Anyways, we're going to be in Phoenix on Thursday, April 21st. We're going to be at the Kimpton Palomar Hotel. Going to be super sweet. Then in Austin, Texas on May 18th, we're going to be with Mandy Crawford, who's the state CIO there. And I know also a Tech Tables fan favorite. And then on July 22nd, we're going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina for the Grillin' and Chillin' live podcast event. And we got a few others in the pipeline that some CIOs have reached out to me about. And I want to say, if you're a vendor, Austin is sold out. So that one's done. Phoenix is almost sold out. And I want to say Raleigh is in motion. So make sure to get your tickets. These are a ton of fun events. And you can catch episode 78, where my wife interviews me on Tech Tables for all the details. I know. It was classic. It was a great episode. So let's cover a little more of the tech side. Could you maybe talk about the need for affordable, reliable broadband internet and device access in the metro Milwaukee area? I know you touched upon a little bit of it, but is there anything specific that you can talk about at a high level right now?
A little bit. For us, I think we're still in the planning stages. I think one of the big things that we have going in Milwaukee is we have a great coalition. The part that I think we're trying to figure out is, okay, who leads who? Because when you're in urban broadband, it's a city thing. So you have a county CIO saying, hey, let's do this urban broadband, but it's really, the infrastructure is inside cities. And so it's got to be a coalition and we'll around it. And we met with the governor about 5 weeks ago, where he talked about urban broadband with us. In the state of Wisconsin, they're expanding broadband in the rural areas. He talked about the struggles they had there, but he really started turning his attention towards, he realizes an urban issue. And the urban issue can be, it's not that the broadband doesn't exist, is that the broadband is not affordable, or we have digital redlining is what we call it, where you've had traditional, redlined areas that were redlined from it. So you have generational poverty. And so we didn't have high-speed internet go in those areas. Yeah, there's internet available, but it's not the greatest internet. So those are things that we were talking to with the government. What do we need to do? How do we get affordable internet for people? How do we get subsidized? And those type of things. And how do we make it? It's just not a one-shot done. It's got to be maintainable year after year. So those are things that we were talking with the governor alongside, and also the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. And so there's things that we're working on right now where we're putting a letter together, stating what the problem, or actually it's almost a small book probably by now, because it shows like maps, where's everything going on, because we want to show them what the problem is and what we're trying to address and the outcomes of it. And at the same time, what we learned, another CIO of my network is Art Thompson in Detroit. And Detroit also is doing the same thing. They're working on their digital equity plan. Part of them is they're looking at fibering up their entire city. And they're looking at the infrastructure bill coming down, the current ARPA funds, and how they're funding it. So we actually met up and had a meeting with them, and me and Art talked about what we should do is we should set up a Midwest coalition where we're all working together on this, because we're all working the same problem. We're just trying to figure out what works for us and what's our measurements. And Art has actually built some measurements over there that he's going to be sending to us about how to ensure that you're making progress. Because one thing is that we can talk about accessibility and broadband, but the minute we do an assessment, that assessment starts changing as people start moving around. So it goes to how are we doing? How are we making sure that everyone has accessibility? The funny part about some of these conversations is I sat here, I go, do you think 100 years ago they had the same questions about electricity as we go on? Not saying that broadband's a utility, but we've had those talks out loud saying, this is probably along the same lines. Like, how do you provide electricity to everyone? How do you provide broadband? Everyone's house to make sure everyone has accessibility, but yet also have the competition so that the broadband continuously improves and everyone has good access to broadband. So those are the things I think that we've been working on with, again, the United Milwaukee and Waukesha. David Burka is who's heading up that along the lines there. And then David Henke's the CIO for the city of Milwaukee. Me and him meet once a month with each other in person to talk through the things that were going along. And then you have Ted Meyer, who heads up the Milwaukee Public School System. And we've been talking to him because let's do it today. I know area codes where we can just go and we can put in, a mesh network, which a mesh network, if I'm pretty sure there's a lot of tech people listening to your podcast, but, mesh network is where we hook up with light poles and we add an access point to light poles, run fiber to certain areas. Then we just mesh out a network right over top of houses. And so people have access to internet right from their houses. And they've done this already in Oakland, California, or San Jose, or out by you, Joe. And then they've done stuff in Council Bluffs, Alexandria, Virginia. I believe they're doing now. So there's areas around the country where they've had success doing this in neighborhoods that are underserved. So this is how they're getting connectivity up. And so those are things that we're working on from within Milwaukee. Not there, but we have some great ideas. We got people lining up. The Army guy in me, I've said it a couple of times in a couple of meetings. I'm like, guys, I'm going to execute because I'm more take that hill there. And once I got 51% of the solution, start rolling. We'll figure the rest of it way out on the way there. And so I will be, I have anxiety over it because I will be happier and relieved when people start getting access to broadband. Urban League of Milwaukee asks us about it too, because they have people come saying, hey, I need access to internet. How can I get it? And these are things we need to address as society. And again, to lift up the Milwaukee to get to our point of being the healthiest county in the state of Wisconsin, I think it's one of the things that we need to address, work with the municipalities, work with local organizations, work with nonprofits, and figure out what those solutions are so we can get everyone connected and get everyone to being able to telehealth, education, jobs, all those things. And in COVID, the one thing about, let's say, but COVID is horrible, but for technology, it moved us ahead really fast. It did a lot of things we said we could do, and it got us out there. And I just think there's more to come, and we should take advantage of what's available to us now. And we talk about the infrastructure bill and ARPA funds. Again, I worked in manufacturing prior to this and logistics, and now I'm in government. But that's a lot of money. It's a one-time injection of money that we're probably not going to see again in our lifetime. So let's do something good with it. Let's make sure people get connected, because that gets us into the next level of where we want to get to.
Yeah, I love that. You had mentioned when we were talking on the phone about a gap within IT systems. I was curious if you could maybe just pick up what is that gap and how do you bridge that? Were you referring to the technology side of the IT systems? I wonder if you could just give a little bit more.
When we talk about bridging the gap, which is one of the objectives, some part of that is IT systems. And so bridging the gap in a government entity, and you'll hear across the board, there's a lot of siloed data systems. I'll start there with data because that's one of our pillars that's just inside our IT strategy is how do we get data-driven decisions? How can we prove out, and then also understand that our data could be biased? And so it's really teaching departments about data stewardship and really trying to bridge that gap with data, and how can we get that data in the hands of leaders, and so leaders can look at it and make good decisions for what's next. And it's like when I talked about the urban broadband, exactly where are we having issues with the urban broadband and what can we do? And I think we have to look at that data and do it. And from our IT systems, again, the end user experience, we have lots of IT systems now. What's our gaps for their current systems? What's not user friendly? What do I have access to that someone else doesn't have access to because of their position or what are from internet access, device access, or what devices they're using? So we have to look at what are the gaps in those IT systems that are causing barriers for people so they can get across, so they can get to that next level. And those are all hard things, but I think as we keep talking about it, we build into our policies and procedures that whenever we implement a technology, we need to look at who might be left behind because we implemented this technology, and not everyone's going to be able to buy the latest and greatest stuff or keep the systems updated. And from a tech side, you're talking to me as a CIO. In the last 5 years, the county has moved to a very, very sustainable IT environment where cloud hosted, all that kinds of stuff that we always look at being very secure. Cloud hosted. I know right now, as I start saying this, my CISO's whoa, Lynn, watch out before you say too much about what we got going on. But from that point, I feel really good that our infrastructure is in a good spot, and we're constantly improving that. I think once you have your infrastructure down, you can do all these good things. If this software is not working out, or this application is not working, or this technology is not working out, let's move to a different technology that improves lives for everyone. I think those are the gaps that we're going to be identifying gaps. It's constant improvements that you have to continuously make. My background, I have a Lean Six Sigma background. So every time I look at stuff, I'm always looking at measurements. What's the measurement now? What do we want to improve? And how do we measure it afterwards and make sure we've achieved that objective? So I think along those lines, that those are the gaps in the IT system that we need to look for. We need to look for just how can we provide that service to everyone and make sure everyone's getting served with what they need. Again, that's the equity component. Equity is not equality, it's equity. Someone's going to need more help than other people. And so how do we get those different levels of equity to ensure that people are getting what they need? Because some people won't need much, some people need a lot. So I think those are things that we have to look at and understand what our technology does. And then also, what can we find in our technology to help lift up those departments that says, hey, this will help in your quest for equity. This can help you get to that point. So those are things that we're looking at. Even we've just started putting our toes into AI a little bit. We're looking at just, one of the things Milwaukee County is doing also with all this going, with everything that I just talked about, we're also looking at all of our policies, procedures, law ordinances to ensure that there's equity, there's not inequities with them. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to use AI, is to develop an algorithm to see outcomes from those ordinances or AI, to be able to point at ordinances or rules that are having inequity, that have an inequitable outcome, so we can address those ordinances and change those laws that have been in place for long. Because written within laws are biases that people don't realize are there. You read real fast, you might not see it, but the outcomes are inequitable. And so that's one thing that I showed up at the table and said, we were looking at reading through each one of these, and I said, well, this is going to be inconsistent when, and again, I'm going to say humans are involved, but if you have humans read law upon law upon law, you're not going to get just a perfect outcome. Yeah, you're going to come up with some good outcomes, but not perfect. And I'm not saying AI will get you perfect, but it'll be consistent. And those are things that we're trying to walk through with the county. Can we use AI to help us in our quest to get to a point of where we've addressed our ordinances and laws equitably? Again, that goes back to data not being biased too. That's part of it too, is making sure your data is not biased.
We could go a lot deeper and for a lot longer, but maybe we'll have you back on Tech Tables because I know we are out of time. Where's your favorite spot? Where do you like to hang out at? LinkedIn, Twitter? Do you have a preference?
You know what? I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I'd say that's where we hang out. It's funny because I Snapchat because of my kids. I have a 25-year-old. They're Snapchatters, and people are totally surprised when they're like, Lynn, you're 50, you Snapchat. I'm like, yeah, all the time. I'm always kicking stuff out. That's how we communicate. And it's always videos or something. And it's always facial expressions. I stay really close to my kids. And I think part of that is from deployment. So my kids witnessed me, going to Iraq and being gone for 13 months and coming back. So they know what it's like to be gone. So I think we have this really close relationship with each other, and that's why we Snapchat with each other and stuff like that. So I look at social media, and I just figure, as a technologist, and not every technologist would agree with me, I dive into all of them just to try to figure out, okay, what's this? Instagram, all this stuff, just go through. Not saying that I use it extensively, but boy, when you talked about Twitter, you want to see, I will. So there's stuff like that out there. So you can look me up. I use my name directly, so I don't try to hide myself at all. You can find me out there on that. So yeah, so those are things. That's where I hang out. That's where I hang out online and stuff like that. And even at I talk about, well, this is great when you talk about you said where I hang out. I find this funny. There's a couple of my friends do this, but at Soldier, Command Sergeant Major, a couple combat tours, everything else. When I look at now, I have an Oculus, and part of that is I wanted to understand the virtual reality technology and using it. Then I start thinking about how can we use this in government to actually deliver better services. And so maybe I shamelessly plugged the Oculus there, but virtual reality is also something I think we have to look at to see how can we use that to enhance lives. I can even go further down the road because we talk the technology are come out, like we can deploy drones to people who are having heart attacks because it'll take an ambulance 5 minutes to get there. We can get a drone there in 1 minute. And then maybe a VR system can help someone and walk someone through what to do. And so there's things like that we talk about. So I think, again, technology is where everything's going, and we should use the technologies ethically, but I think we can help improve a lot of people's lives using it. So I wrapped it all around, like, where's my best hangout to write in the VR and everything else.
I love that. True technologist. Great. Lynn, thank you for coming on Tech Tables. Really appreciate the time. It was a lot of fun today.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Thanks for the platform. I hope to speak again, and I hope to run into you with the forums down what in Austin you said, and down as soon as you said food, I said you should have a beer and brat one up here in Wisconsin. We'll bring all the CIOs up here. So give it a thought. Maybe you can come to Milwaukee.
Oh, I like that. This is how this starts. This is how this exactly started, with the CIOs saying, "Hey, come to my city." Maybe we'll have to do that. We'll have to get a few together. We'll do a live podcast event, and then everyone can stop thinking about the same problems, and everyone can work on the same problems all in person together. So I love that. I will definitely be following up with you. We might be coming to Milwaukee later, 2022. Thanks, Lynn.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Joe Tossi from TechTables.com, and you're listening to the Public Sector Show by Tech Tables. This podcast features human-centric stories from public sector CIOs, CISOs, and technology leaders across federal, state, city, county, and higher education. You'll gain valuable insights into current issues and challenges faced by top leaders. Through interviews, speaking engagements, live podcast tour events, we offer you a behind-the-mic look at the opportunities top leaders are seeing today. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts, hit that follow button, and leave a quick rating. Just tap the number of stars that you think this show deserves.